Welcome to the Heartland Journal's Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy. Welcome back to the Heartland Journal. I'm Steve Abramowitz, your host. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. That's my only ask. And thanks for doing it. We focus on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. Today we are talking with special guest Hank Erwin Jr. Former Alabama State Senator Hank Erwin is known as the storyteller of motivation. His talent for telling stories that entertain and result in commitment and action are legendary. He learned the art of storytelling from his late father, Medal of Honor recipient Henry "Red" Erwin, who held small crowds spellbound with stories of bravery in World War II. The stories were so detailed and compelling that Hank embraced the art form into his own life. Hank became a committed Christian in college and married his sweetheart Sheila Daniel the day before his graduation. They have been together now 52 years, with 2 married sons, famously known as the Erwin brothers of movie-making stardom, and 7 grandchildren. But it was telling stories that guided his life. Hank attended Dallas Seminary in Texas to become a preacher, but during those days, God opened a door into radio and TV to become an on-air personality. So he plunged into media for nearly 30 years as a journalist and talk show host. Erwin, whose experience as chaplain for Birmingham's Woodlawn High School football team in the early 1970s Alabama, inspired the film Woodlawn, began his collegiate career playing baseball for Troy State University in 1967. The 1972 graduate served in the Alabama State Senate from 2002 until 2010 and was a radio and television broadcaster in the state for more than 35 years. Hank became a media advocate for pro-life and family values, patriotism, and conservative issues. It won him awards and notice in Alabama among voters looking for fresh faces in a world of politics. In 2002, Hank was elected to the Alabama State Senate and served 2 terms as a firebrand for conservative families across the state. He fought gambling to a standstill and helped usher in a whole new Republican government for the people of Alabama. However, it was his bedtime stories that really changed history. As a loving father, he told his 2 sons bedtime stories when they were very young. He used Woodlawn football stories that were so colorful that it ignited their imaginations to become movie makers. Now, 40 years later, the world knows the famous Erwin brothers, Andy and John. They have gone on to produce and direct 11 award-winning faith-based motion pictures that have garnered 11 Dove Awards for Outstanding Achievement in Christian Film. Among their films are such notables as October Baby, Woodlawn, I Can Only Imagine, and Jesus Revolution, with I Can Only Imagine 2 coming out this year, and House of David 2, Season 2, also coming soon. Hank and his wife Sheila currently live in Franklin, Tennessee. Here with me today, Hank Erwin is the founder of Great American Prayer, with the second gap coming early 2026. I can't wait. Let's check this out. Hank, welcome to the studio. How are you today?
Glad to be here, Steve. Always good to be with you, and I appreciate what you do. Your show was awesome, and I am delighted just to be here and visit with you, so it's going to be a great day.
All right. Well, coming from you, that is high praise, and you're all going to find out about it. This is a special treat. Hank, I've never met a more powerful prayer warrior than you. Do you want to start our show off with a prayer?
That would be an awesome thing to do. I think that's the best way you can start anything. So let's pray. Now, our Father and our God, thank you so much for the privilege to be on this radio show, this podcast with my good friend Steve, and I just pray your blessings on the time we have together. I pray that people will realize that you are real, that Jesus, you are real. You're not some kind of philosophy. You're a real person, and that people can get to know you and enjoy you and meet you in person and become your friend. I love it. Thank you so much for you saving my life and the joy of serving a great Savior like you. I pray your blessings on our podcast today. May it reach people around the world, and may people see that Jesus can make a difference in your life. And we pray these things in your name. Amen.
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 So let's start in the beginning. You know, you're a movie entertainment type guy. Let's start with your origin story. So a baseball standout at Inslee High School Erwin graduated in 1967 and went on to play baseball at Troy State University, graduating in 1972. I was one. Was that the end of your baseball career? Ever consider going pro?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're very kind. I appreciate that. Those are some good memories. That was always my dream when I was a growing up kid, because back in those days, baseball was everything. And so I played it all the way up from Little League all the way through college. But I got hurt in my college days, and it was then very apparent I'd never be able to play pro ball. So I chose the second avenue, which was to be a baseball coach. That's what I was going to do. I was going to graduate from Troy. Troy is in South Alabama, small schools, now a big school, but back then it was a real small state school. And I was going to come up here to Tennessee and get a master's degree and go into college baseball coaching. Along the way, God changed my life. I became a Christian my sophomore year in college, and it was such a radical change that instead of going into baseball coaching, I decided to go into athlete ministry, and then everything took off. It was an amazing ride, still going on after 56 years.
That's right, and Tennessee was still calling and never let go. We'll get into all of that. Did you have a sports hero of the 60s and 70s you looked up to?
Well, that's an interesting question. Everybody back in those days loved Mickey Mantle. I mean, Mickey Mantle was the king of baseball and the epitome of excellence. So I was a Mickey Mantle fan.
A Yankee,
New York Yankees, number 7.
In Alabama.
And from Alabama, I mean, I just loved watching Mickey Mantle. And so that was my favorite ball player. And then my number in Little League was number 6. Uh-huh. So I chose Al Kaline, who played for the Detroit Tigers. And he was my second hero because I wore number 6.
Okay, all right. So tell us about Woodlawn and how after joining the Wales Goebel Ministries in 1974, you were asked to reach out to the Woodlawn High School football team to quell racial tensions among the players and student body as the team's chaplain. Did most high schools have team chaplains back then? And who asked you to go there first?
Oh, excellent question. When I decided to do an athlete ministry, I decided to focus on high schools because back then in the late 60s, early 70s, Fellowship of Christian Athletes was the renowned athlete ministry, but it was only at the college level. It hadn't gotten down into the high school level. So I just thought I would just start an independent athlete ministry in the high schools in Birmingham. And when I started that, during the summer of 1973, the cheerleaders from over at Woodlawn High School came over to our ministry and asked if we could go over and speak to their boyfriends on the football team, because the football team was full of turmoil. This was in the early days of integration and busing, and it was a very difficult time for Birmingham at that time to integrate the schools. A lot of resistance, a lot of pushback. It was not a happy place.
All the easy places are taken, so you went right into where one of the hardest ones in your purview you could handle. So let's set the stage on that a little bit. So we had the bombing of the Birmingham riots in 1963 and the 16th Street Baptist Church in September 1963. 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated. 68, MLK gets killed. 1974, Race Relations Board annual report said registered its highest number of cases since 1970 and a record number of discrimination cases, 1,068 cases, a 20% increase over 73. What was it like walking onto campus in that charged atmosphere?
It's about the worst case scenario you could get if you're going to try to do sports because we came into a situation where you had hatred was everywhere. The coaches hated the players hated the coaches, players hated each other, the school hated each other. I mean, it was just a atmosphere of hate, and you could feel it, seething hate. And so when we went in there and talked to their football team, and really laid out the case for Jesus, how Jesus could make a difference in your team and make a difference in your life. They had the most amazing thing happen. They all came down out of the stands and just collapsed on the gym floor crying like babies.
These are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids.
It's 15, 16, 17.
The only answer to the hate was Jesus.
His only answer. And they got up off the floor, and I saw something I've never seen before, and I thought, this is the answer to our problems. I saw white boys get up and go over and hug black boys and say, forgive us, we're wrong. And I saw black boys get up and go over to the white boys and hug them and say, forgive us for our attitudes. And all of a sudden, family broke out. It was no longer black and white. It was family. And that became the solution to the Woodlawn situation. And that team bonded so well that they calmed the entire school down. And all of a sudden, family broke out in the school, because everybody was rooting for the family on the field. I remember when we started the season, and you can see it in the movie Woodlawn, that on one end you had the black folks sitting, and then on the other end you had the white folks sitting, and they didn't even talk to each other. I mean, it was just that bad. But because the team became family, all of a sudden it began to bleed over into the stands, and all of a sudden people started moving into family situations. And by the end of the season, it was all family.
Could visually see integration
You
between
really
the
could.
families of blacks and whites.
Jesus changed.
Do you remember saying something in particular that like resonated so strongly? Because, you know, we all have, not we don't all, but a lot of us have kids, and they don't always listen to us. You know, sometimes they're like, oh, old man, old white man, whatever. Like, did you have like a thunderclap that you were able to deliver that you can remember them all being like, wait a minute, I think that guy's onto something?
Yeah, I think, just talking to them and telling them the story of Jesus and how he made a difference in your life. They were hungry for something. They just wanted to have somebody strong enough, not strong enough, but just
convinced enough. Yeah, brave. Yeah.
That would stand up and say, listen, guys, this is what you need to know. And they responded to that. The team got saved first. The coaching staff lagged behind. And the reason was they grew up in the era of tough guy football. And Tandy Geralds was the head football coach, and he grew up in the days where you were a strong man. You didn't get Jesus in your life, that'd make you a cupcake. So he was the kind of guy that was resistant. He let it go because he said, well, if it helps them and it helps our season, because we don't have much to look forward to, he let it go. But he didn't really get into it until later in the season. And you can see that in the movie Woodlawn, where he gets saved in the middle of the season because he said, I don't know what they got, but I got to have it.
Right.
And he changed his life.
More John Wayne, less Jesus Christ, until you figured it out for him.
Right.
So also, Alabama Governor George Wallace is known for his forceful opposition to racial integration during the Civil Rights Movement, famously stating in the Foster Auditorium doorway at the University of Alabama in 1963, did that have an effect on you as a teenager?
We heard that. George Wallace was a good friend of my dad's, so we knew we had awareness of him, and he was the governor of Alabama. And at that time, until they got into the integration system, he was a very effective governor, and people loved him in Alabama. He was a World War II veteran. He was a tail gunner on a B-29. My dad was on the same field with him. He was in a different unit. Both of them were B-29 guys, so they were friends because of that. And Dad had the Medal of Honor from World War II, so he and Wallace were friends. George Wallace is a remarkable guy, if I could just say this, in the sense that he was trying to do what was right, but it was a wrong approach. And later on, it ended up where he was shot in an assassination attempt. And that assassination attempt changed his heart, and he accepted Jesus as his Savior. Oh. And he became a totally different man and became totally determined to make up for the wrongs that he did in those early days of standing in the door. And he moved and got more black folks involved in his administration. He wrote a letter to John, to the guy that tried to assassinate him, and I'm going blank on his name, but he wrote him a letter forgiving him and asking him to consider Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. And so he did a flip-flop change. God changed his life, proving that God can change people, and they can look back and review their life and try to make it right. And that's what he tried to do. He tried to make the things right that he had done wrong.
Wow.
And,
especially leaders, especially in the 60s.
And
so
he had a great respect by the black community after that.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to talk about other leaders that had very similar stories, and that one I did not know. So you got your degree at Southwestern Bible College in 1974 and a Master's of Arts at the Dallas Seminary in 1981, but you didn't become a priest. What changed your path in the 80s?
Interesting story. You're asking good questions. I like that.
Thank you. I did my research.
We were, I got saved when I was in college. And when I got saved, I didn't know anything about the Christian faith. I didn't know anything about Jesus. I'd go to church, but I was into baseball. That was my thing. And I remember when I got saved and Jesus changed my life, I had never read the Bible. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to read the Bible. And I started reading the Bible. And then I had a lot of athletes start coming down to my room in the dorm and saying, what does the Bible say about my problem I've got? And I said, well, I don't really know. I'm a brand new Christian myself. So I began to think maybe I need to study the Bible a little bit more. So I studied it to the point where I could at least give some elementary counsel. And it meant a lot to the guys. But I began to wonder, is God calling me into a ministry? Because I was thinking about baseball coach. And I said, well, if I'm going to go in the ministry, I need to really understand this book. I need to be able to give accurate answers. So that's when I said, where's the best place I can go to learn the Bible? And Dallas Seminary at that time was considered like the West Point of seminaries. And so I said, if I can go there, I think that would be where I need to go. So Sheila and I packed up in 1975 our little bitty car, and we drove to Dallas, and I got into Dallas Seminary and spent 6 wonderful years in Dallas and learning the Bible, and it was awesome. But I needed a job to work our way through. I needed to pay the bills. We needed to eat. And so a radio station was going on the air, and they said, we need a sportscaster. And I casually mentioned to them, well, I know sports, but I don't know anything about radio. And they said, okay, here's what we'll do. We will teach you radio. You do sports for us. And I said, okay. So I started as a sportscaster on the radio show and on the radio station, and I did that for about 2 years. And then a TV station called up and said, would you like to do TV? And I said, well, I've never done TV. I don't know anything about it. They said, oh, we'll teach it to you. Come on. And that's how I got into TV. And so it became obvious that was my career path. So we just kind of stayed with it. And I went from a cub reporter to a weekend anchor to a weeknight anchor, then got hired to come back to Birmingham and be a news director of a TV station, and then went into talk radio after that and did that for about 25 years in Alabama.
I got more questions about that in a second, but before we jump into that part of the life of Hank, did you have a spiritual role model like a Rex Hubbard, Cathedral of Tomorrow show, or Reverend Ike on the radio? That Cathedral of Tomorrow got on to 600 stations at its peak.
Yeah. Well, my heroes, when I first got saved, I had three heroes. After my father was the ultimate hero that I had.
Red.
That was my dad. And but then Billy Graham was number one after that. Billy Graham taught me the early things. I used to listen to his show, and I would read his books, and I would watch him on television. Billy Graham influenced me more than any person other than my dad when I first got saved. Then after that, Bill Bright, who was the founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, because Campus Crusade taught me the early information and principles of a discipled life. So Campus Crusade became my disciple vehicle that taught me the early principles of the Bible and the early principles of walking with Jesus. And then there was, in those days, a man named Bill Gothard with his Institute of Biblical Studies that he was doing all over the country. And I went to several of his seminars, packed out with 16,000 people. And he taught me some basic principles to life that I did not know. And those were very foundational to my perspective on life as a Christian. So those three guys, Bill Bright, Billy Graham, Bill Gothard, those were the early influencers and mentors of my young Christian life.
The three Bills.
Three Bills.
You started in radio and television in 1976, broke into radio broadcasting while a seminary student in Dallas, worked as a sportscaster at KCBI-FM, where you launched a Christian sports radio talk show, went on to host a talk show on WDJC-FM from 96 to 99, then moved to WYDE-AM and Hank Erwin Show, WOTM in Montebello.
Yeah.
Happy Days was the top-rated TV show in the United States at the time, with Laverne and Shirley, MASH, Charlie's Angels, and The $6 Million Man, for those of us born in the 70s who want some frame of reference. What do you look fondly on about your time in TV and radio in those days, 70s, 80s, 90s?
Amazing times. I just say this. Those were some of the most amazing times of my life, to be on radio and TV. I never thought I would be in that genre. And to be able to speak to the people on issues where they were facing. The way I did my radio show was different than other talk radio shows. All of it, the journalism that I had up to the point where I started doing a talk show taught me the principles of journalism. But then when I got into talk radio and I was the host, I would listen to people like Larry King and all of those folks to get an idea of how do you do a talk radio show.
Johnny Carson, maybe.
And that's true. But the thing I said is that if I'm going to try to answer questions, there's got to be an umpire. You know, I don't want it to be my opinion that if you want to have a happy life, you do what I say. That's a lot of what Rush Limbaugh did. Rush Limbaugh and I went on at the same time. He had his show and I had my show. And in the Alabama area, we developed an audience of flip-floppers because we were on at the same time. And he was on an AM station and I was on an FM station, so we had a stronger signal. So people would flip back and forth. And it was uncanny that we tended to have the same type of personality and presentation. But the difference between Rush and me was I believed that the Bible has to be the umpire of who's right and who's wrong. There's got to be an umpire in there. There's got to be an objective umpire. And so I made the Bible the source of the show. And whatever topic we talked about, whether it would be divorce or whether it be gambling or whether it be, whatever you have in life that you go through, troubled kids and all that stuff, you had to have a source that you could go back to find the correct answer. And I said, we deal with the issues of life here on this show through the Bible so that you can have accurate information and the Lord can help you grow and get through whatever problem you're in. Yeah. And it became a fantastic formula that it was what we used, and we had a great following.
Rush would have probably defaulted more to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, patriotism, right, the Republican platform, right, secular stuff, whereas you, okay, I see it now, especially in the Bible Belt or the right, most Christian state of them all, Alabama.
Rush got saved later on in his life when he got cancer, and he got really into Jesus at the end of his life. First part of his life, he was more into himself.
And his brother David is he writes great books about Jesus.
Yeah, it's true. So one funny little anecdote. I got a call one day from Phyllis Schlafly with Eagle Forum, and she said, "We want you to come to Washington for a banquet." I said, "What for?" She says, "We want to give you an award." For what? For what you're doing on radio. And so I said, "Well, I probably need to get permission from my general manager to see if we could do this. And so I said, yeah, they want to give me an award. Should I go? And they said, yeah, go. So I flew to Washington, and we had a big banquet there in Washington, Eagle Forum banquet. Phyllis Schlafly, and there's about 500 people in there. And the guest speaker was Judge Bork. He was the guest speaker. But before he spoke, Phyllis Schlafly calls me up and says, we want to give you an award, the first time ever we've ever given this award for excellence in broadcasting, faith-based broadcasting. So she gave me a huge trophy, and I was just blown away. I said, I didn't expect this. She said, we want to let you know that people appreciate what you're doing. Keep it up. Wow. Now, the funny story is she gave the second one to Rush Limbaugh.
Well, you beat him out on that one, that's for sure.
So it's a little bit of an antidote.
Yeah, that's a great one. And if I'm not mistaken, there are like 15,000 radio stations in the U.S., 650 of them had him on there. Was the highest rated talk show in the United States in 1988. So, he did great. What differentiated Christian sports radio from regular sports radio? I mean, sports radio in the 80s was thriving because TV broadcasting hadn't really gotten going yet.
Sure, yeah. And matter of fact, is still sports radio is X's and O's. But I wanted to do something different. When I was doing sports radio, what I wanted to do is to explore what Jesus means in an athlete's life. And I would always have Christian athletes on, like even coaches. I had Coach Landry on, Dallas Cowboys. I would have folks like Roger Staubach and folks like Bob Brunig, played middle linebacker. I would interview Christian athletes who had a testimony. And back during those days, it was an emerging niche that we were able to really tap into, because a lot of athletes couldn't really tell their story because the other radio stations didn't care to talk about Jesus and put it together in how it affects your sports performance. So I said, this is our niche. And we had a very successful run at that. And people loved it because we brought Jesus into sports, and to see you can be a Christian and you can be a great athlete.
Yeah, no, unbelievable. And like I said, I think, in my humble opinion, Alabama was the right place at the right time. I know you said you started in Dallas, but by the time you got there, you already had your bona fides from saving the universe, for Christianity at high school levels, and now you got to talk to the whole region, the whole area, the SEC, let's call it. So, did you have a political role model?
Political Ronald Reagan. Yeah,
I knew it. I find similarities very striking between you and Reagan. Luckily, I don't think you've been shot. But in 1966, California faced serious problems, huge budget deficit, the highest taxes in the nation, a frightening crime rate, exploding welfare costs, and air and water pollution. Sound familiar to today? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan won the governorship of California with a simple, consistent philosophy. He championed economic freedom, smaller government, fewer regulations, and lower taxes. Also saved later in life. Later for him, teenager, but much different problems than Alabama for you that we described earlier. Both are Republicans. Yeah. And Ronald Reagan worked as a sports announcer for WHO radio in Des Moines, Iowa during the 1930s.
That's right.
I know you were born in 1949, but were you aware of him in Alabama when he was governor, taking on the university professors for letting kids protest Vietnam, et cetera?
Oh, yeah. I knew. I used to watch Ronald Reagan on Death Valley days, and watch all of his old movies as well, And so we had a very fun appreciation for Ronald Reagan back in Alabama. We knew him as a movie star, and then when he got into politics, started out with the studio, SAG Actors or Association, whatever, union. We were aware of what he was doing. But when I got into radio and then television in Dallas, he would come through Dallas frequently, either on a campaign or either on a speaking engagement. So I got a chance to sit down with him and just listen to him, and it's about as far as from here. And so I got a chance to get the feeling of his personality. And the one thing that I noticed about Reagan, which was totally different from any other politician that I had either interviewed or reported on, and you'll find this in politics, a lot of politicians are two-faced, which is where they have a public persona and then they have a private life, and they don't match. Whatever you see in public, they're not at all like that in private.
What did they call Dick Morris called Clinton Friday Night Bill and Saturday Morning Bill?
Yeah. But Ronald Reagan was different. In the times that I was around him, I became convinced this guy is genuine, because what you saw in the public and what you saw in the private meshed. He was the real deal. And I remember saying to myself after one of those times around him, I said, if I ever get a chance to do politics, I'm going to do it just like him, which is what you see is what you get. And that was a winning formula, and I never forgot it.
That's amazing. It really is. I knew it. I could sense it. You got elected to the Alabama Senate in 2002 and won re-election against two Republican challengers in the 2006 primary elections. Republican two-term state senator from Alabama from 2002 to 2010. The news gives you credit for your work for veteran benefits, opposed gambling, supporting restrictions on the sale of alcohol, made divorces harder to obtain, and protect churches from government intrusion. Boy, did we see a bunch of that in the COVID era. Got you named Legislator of the Year in 2005 by the VFW. In 2008, Erwin proposed creating an I Believe license plate modeled after one issued in South Carolina. What did you learn about Alabama and the Alabama people from your time in office?
Well, I tell you what, Alabama has some great people, and they always have been. They're down-home people that will take care of you and give you the shirt off their back. Doesn't matter what their color of their skin is, Alabama people are great people. And I had a great district in Alabama that I was really grateful for. I went into Alabama politics and got elected in the Republican Shelby County, it's like Williamson County here. And the thing that we noticed is that the country was shifting from Democrat to Republican, namely because of Ronald Reagan. But Alabama was still staunch Democrat. It had been a Democrat-controlled state for 135 years since the Civil War. So when I went in as a Republican, there was only about 10 of us in the Alabama Senate. And we faced a fierce pushback from the Democrat forces that were in charge of the Senate that didn't want to give up that power. And there were, for the first time ever, 10 Republican senators. And so there was the idea, we're going to bury you and stop you and teach you a lesson. And so we had to stand up to all of that and take a lot of grief. But we felt like this is what the people wanted. They wanted new blood. They wanted a new way. They wanted a new day. And so we stuck together, and we changed the Alabama landscape. And Alabama is a Republican state today. Mm-hmm. Been that way for 20 years now. And but it took us a fight of standing for values, of standing for families, and not backing down that won the day. So I was there in the turnaround and was able to say that if I could say what was one of the achievements of it, it was that we turned the state around and we gave Alabama a family Republican government that's taking care of their people, and that's what we're satisfied with.
You sure did. And one of your rivals for governor, Kay Ivey, has been there ever since. Yeah. They get a new governor next year, like Tennessee does. Ironically, around the same time, they also had their Republican revolution to change a longstanding Democratic state to what we now know it as a conservative state, a red state they call it. Tommy Tuberville, the coach at Auburn. War Eagle. Do you know him? Any thoughts on him?
I've met Tommy. I know him. He's going to be the governor. He's got enough name ID that he'll be the governor, and I think he'll do a great job. So he will come in next year and take Alabama in a new direction. Kay Avey's done a great job. She's kept the state of Alabama stable and quiet and comfortable, and so that the government can function, taking care of the people. One of the things that is sad about government is they get when a person goes into government, and you have to deal with this when you go into it. There is so much attention and so much power that you're giving, that you've been given by being elected, especially at the Senate level, is that people begin to covet that power and will do anything to keep that power. And there's the thing that you always have to go through as a politician of this statement of how much does it take for you to sell your soul? You will face that in politics one time or sooner or later, because people will say, oh, I'll help you out if you vote this way. And a lot of politicians get compromised real quick, and that's where your corruption comes from. And it's every level of government. And sooner or later, you've got to make up your mind, what am I all about? When I went into politics, when I got elected, the one thing I was going to do is I was going to go in as a Christian. Jesus changed my life. This is a new assignment, but I'm still a Christian. And that has to be the controlling factor on everything I vote for, everything I study on, and everything I speak out on. It's got to be taken in that context. And I remember one senator came up to me, I guess in the first 2 weeks that I was in the Senate, and he put his arm around me, and he said, put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, we've seen hundreds of guys like you come down here, and we've corrupted every one of them, and we'll get you.
Wow.
And I shoved his arm around and just brushed it off, and I said, well, go for it. and
Get behind me, Satan.
And so about 2 or 3 years later, he started going back to church. So we saw a lot of guys in the Senate really come closer to the Lord, and several of them prayed to receive Christ. But the thing I want to tell you is this. I was humbled to be able to prove that you can go in with a pure heart and you can come out with a pure heart, but you got to be determined to have a pure heart if you're going to go into politics.
A lot of weaker women and men can't say the same, but you sure did. The Hour of Power, for over 40 years, broadcast the Schuler's Crystal Cathedral during the 1990s. His televised sermons were regularly viewed by an estimated audience of 20 million. Did you ever have any dealings with California evangelists like Robert? You mentioned Billy Graham. Did you meet him? And did you see the power of media and politics for your Christianity?
That's a good question. I never met Billy Graham. I met Franklin. Franklin, I did a radio show with Franklin it was a really funny story. I was up in North Carolina, and I did had Franklin on the show at the Cove. We did a 30-minute national show, and then we got through. Franklin said, now, make sure you go up and see Daddy before you leave. And I said, Franklin, your daddy doesn't know me from Adam's house cat. And if you don't go with me, I'm not going to go up there and knock on the door because I don't want to have the security come running up. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. Just go up there and knock on the door. He's fine. And I said, can you go with me? I'd feel more comfortable if you go with me. He said, I can't go. I got another meeting. I said, well, the day when you can go with me, I'll be happy to go up and meet your daddy. But I have never met Billy Graham, never met him. I sat in back of him in church one day, but I never got a chance to meet him.
Well, he was tall. That would be unfortunate. You wouldn't be able to see the pastor. Well, you said the Cove. You said it. I didn't. That obviously led to huge things for you and your family with the Jesus Revolution movie that basically put Kingdom Story and I guess it was Lionsgate on the map, if I'm not mistaken, which is definitely more faith-based material than we're going to get from Disney these days. So was your experience in real life, like Woodlawn and the Cove, related to the movie that came out and was a blockbuster for your kids.
Oh, for Jesus Revolution.
Yeah.
That was
took place in the Cove, right?
Yeah. Well, that's Pirates Cove. Pirates Cove is on the West Coast, over in California, Southern California, because that's the place where Chuck Smith and all of the hippies and the zippies and the yippies got saved in the late '60s, and the Jesus Revolution movie that my boys made was to tell the story of Greg Laurie, who is one of the great evangelists that's there in Southern California, over in Riverside. And so there's the Pirates Cove, which is the place where they did all of the baptisms that's seen in the movie. That's the cove there. And then there is a Baptist retreat center over in North Carolina called the Cove as well. So there's two, and it's understandable that it can get confused. But just for accuracy, the Pirates Cove is connected to Jesus Revolution, and that's where a lot of that happened. Now, we were in the Jesus movement, but we were not coming out of a hippie background. We were coming from the East Coast type, which was revival happening around colleges and college campuses. We were on that side. So you had the hippie side coming out of Southern California, and then you had the conservative Christian group coming out of the East, and they kind of met at Dallas in 1972 with the Explo 72 event. It had 80,000 in the Cotton Bowl, and then they had another 250,000 in the closing meeting on Saturday with Billy Graham and Johnny Cash. So that was the biggest movement ever attempted to bring college kids, young people together in a rally for Jesus. So I always have fun talking with Mike Huckabee about this, because Mike Huckabee was there too. He was a student. He was sitting up in the end zone, he told me, and I was sitting with my wife Sheila down on about the 20-yard line. 80,000 people there.
You had better seats.
We had some great stories of the way that Jesus used him and his life, and sharing the opportunity to say we were there too.
And now he's the ambassador to Israel. Well, okay, and he also had a TV show on TBN, which I will talk about that in a second. Let's delve into that just a little bit more. Let's see how I can phrase it the most direct way. So, obviously, you were very involved. This is a very, very, very mournful, somber week that you and I are recording this. Obviously, we don't even know how to digest it yet, but Charlie Kirk, who is one of the young faith leaders on college campuses at Turning Point Faith, was gunned down, assassinated, just like MLK, just like Malcolm X, in my opinion, just like Robert Kennedy Sr. What you have been an observer, obviously, of this new era of revivals. We're now in 2025. We talked about your present at the creation of the last one. What's your thoughts on the young leader Charlie Kirk, as well as the revival on college campuses from Auburn to Kentucky? Actually, everywhere.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere. I was just like every American, just stunned about a blatant, callous, horrible crime that was committed, shooting any man, whether he be liberal, conservative, white, black, anybody, for just sharing what they believed and what they're there to talk about. And Charlie Kirk had that reputation of just, I'm here to share, I'm here to talk, open mic, very, very daring, but very open-minded to hearing all sorts of opinions. And to be shot for that staggered me, just like it staggered everybody, that we could become that callous, that we would shoot somebody for just what they believed. And I had to admit, just like everybody else, I had two emotions, just like every American had, which was one, just grief, staggering grief that it happened, and then the flip of the staggering rage that you feel for what was done, the crime that is just so reprehensible. You go through that emotional turmoil just like everybody in America did. And so the thing that you do is, if you're going to handle it correctly, you go to prayer and you start wrestling through this with God and saying, Lord, why? And then you begin to read your Bible and see that all throughout the Bible there are martyrs who have given their lives for the Lord, in serving the Lord. You take Stephen, the deacon in Acts 7. He was just sharing and working in the field and telling people about Jesus. He was called on the carpet, executed by the authorities. He'd never done anything wrong. He was executed for what he just said and believed.
And witnessed by Paul, who went on to greater things.
Exactly. So you had to. Then you bring in your theology, and you have to say God is sovereign, meaning that He controls all things, and He knew all about this before it ever happened, and it never happens unless He allows it. And so you have to say this is a moment where, as sad and as horrible as it is, that we have to praise the Lord and say we don't understand, but we know You're a great God, and You have good intentions in mind, and so even though we grieve, we praise, and we say we honor You, Lord. We worship You, and Your will be done.
I didn't know the man. I know he was faithful. I know that he was married and he had 2 young kids under 7. But I have the sense that, like George Wallace, because like you, his answers were all grounded in the Bible,
yes,
both Old and New Testament, and Ronald Reagan, had he survived, he probably would have forgiven his assassin too.
Yes, I'm sure he would. But what's come out of that, as horrible a crime as it has been, it has electrified the American landscape. And now we're seeing and hearing reports of thousands and thousands of young people standing up and saying, we're not going to be afraid anymore. We're not going to be bashful anymore. We're not going to take this anymore. We're going to stand and tell what we believe, and we're not ashamed of Jesus Christ. And I'm seeing that happen all over America. I'm getting
almost
reports
like a
everywhere.
William Wallace figure.
Yeah. And what it's saying is that America is waking up, and they're saying we're not going to be quiet anymore. We've tried to be reasonable. We've tried to, in every way, accommodate and even bend over backwards to let you know that we want you to feel welcome here, and we want you to understand Jesus loves you, and Jesus wants to change your life. So now they're just saying, listen, forget all of that. We're just going to speak up. We're going to speak loud. We're going to tell you the story. We're going to tell it in love, but you need Jesus Christ. And we're seeing that happen all over in Charlie Kirk vigils, all over the American campuses of that are all over the country. And it's getting bigger. It's picking up steam. It is picking up energy. And I think it is going to be a wave that's going to change the entire American culture, and I think America is going to get right with the Lord, and as a result, America is going to find their purpose again and the values that they've held for all of these years, to see how amazing it is to live in this country and all that the Lord has given us. And I think you're going to see a brand new wave of concentration on family. I think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see families starting to bond together and come home and start getting to know each other again, putting down the cell phone and getting off the internet and start having family time. And then the other thing that I see happening is that men are beginning to wake up and say, we've let this thing get out of control so bad that it's come now to this, and heaven forbid if it ever happens again. And I'm seeing men's group actually starting to take root of energy and starting to stand up as a group and starting to say, we are going to start standing like men in the United States of America, and we're going to take care of our country, and we're going to take care of our families. And I think you're going to see an amazing, amazing change in the United States of America. And sadly, it had to start with a crime and a young man shot down to get the attention of everybody in the country. Yeah. But it's now in motion, and I think it's going to be a good thing that's come out of what was intended for evil.
The blessing in disguise. Yeah, 31 years old, he makes him the youngest, let's just say political martyr. He's much younger than MLK by about 8 years. So he, like you, chose the hard places. You, Alabama in the race-torn 60s and 70s, he on college campuses today. What do you see on the college campuses? I'm assuming it's going to outlive Charlie. He wasn't the only one doing this. There's a lot of people that I lived in Washington State. They would cancel. Her name was the long blonde-haired gal. I can't. All of a sudden, I'm blanking on it. Ann Coulter, Yiannopoulos. Anyone who had a outside thought they were canceled, and there was burning buildings, and it was pretty bad. He did it anyway, and he probably knew that this was a potential and could come, but he was faithful, so it was going to be okay. What are you seeing in the college campuses that we can look forward to going forward? I think I saw Oregon University this week had baptized a bunch of people, which is unbelievable. Oregon is probably one of the worst places for the darkness, the heart of darkness. And then Ohio State, which is a state school, not a not a private school per se. What are you seeing out there with the young on the college campuses that Charlie tried to stake claim to?
I think you're going to see some thrilling things happen on college campuses. I believe you're going to see more people get saved, more young people get saved than we had back in the Jesus movement. I think you're going to see young people getting serious about Jesus like never before and becoming some of the finest citizens we've ever had in the United States of America. When a college kid gets the story, when a college kid finds the answer, when a college kid gets right with Jesus, then all of a sudden there's purpose in their life, there is focus in their life, and then there is a future in their life, and they really excel. They take off like a bolt of lightning, and they become sturdy, dependable, determined leaders. Some of the best leaders that we've got in government now came out of the Jesus Revolution, and they came in and they affected music, they affected TV and radio, and they were very creative. And we had some of the best music we've ever had that came out of the Jesus movement. But it's the same thing that will happen today. You're going to have a whole fresh wave of creativity, of young people bringing energy to the American public. That's going to happen. It is going to be an amazing thing. Then you're going to also see that the college campuses are going to calm down. They're not going to be the rowdy, Saturday night, smash that they're going to be more devoted toward conservative values and less of the freestyle, free living, life that you see.
Less Animal House, more Woodlawn.
That's right.
That would be great. And I, as a product of the 70s and 80s myself, going to college in the late 80s into early 90s, I can attest there was not a lot of Jesus going on in Southern California for me during my upbringing. But now, with my son and daughter in college, we've got what we're talking about right here. Whole different animal, like you said. They can be on fire for Jesus early and not make the mistakes on the scenic tour that I took.
Yeah, we all had to learn the hard way, and I am, I look back at my life. I got saved right in the middle of college. My first 2 years, I was a free spirit, and my life was miserable. And so at the end of 2 years, when I made my commitment to Jesus, I meant it. And the last 2 years were amazing. I had the greatest time. The last 2 years of my college career was awesome. And so what I tell college kids that are coming out of high school is that the first thing you need to do when you hit the college campus, find you a Christian group where you can get involved with Jesus from the start, and you will have an amazing 4 years at college. It will be the most exciting time in your whole life. But
that's exactly what Charlie Kirk said when he founded Turning Point Faith, and he didn't go to college.
Yeah.
So he knew that the devil was there if you let him be.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to college and get destroyed. I mean, there are a lot of college kids that come out with scars and nightmares that they carry for all of their life because they went in not seeking to find purpose in life. They just went in because they're supposed to go to college. And
A lot of those same people ended up in D.C. right out of college. They
Yeah.
never even had. Yeah, they never had it. Okay, and now you're on to something new. The founder of Great American Prayer, and the second annual is coming early 2026. What gave you the inspiration for this in 2025?
When we moved to Nashville, we got involved with a group of guys that were my age, and we started praying about the situation of America going into this last election. It was so the meanness and the vileness and everything. It was just a
2020 presidential election.
yeah, 2020. Yeah, and then there's the one we had 24 the same way. So we began to pray, Lord, we got to do something. We just can't sit here and do nothing. So in summer, this time last year in 24, we decided we need to have a prayer meeting. So we started the Great American Prayer event, which was to call the nation to pray the night before the 2024 election. That had never been done before in American history. Even when I was in government, you never had a prayer meeting the night before the election. They'd always say, tune in to see the final lineup of people you're going to vote for tomorrow. But nobody ever bothered to say, we need to pray about this. So we thought this is going to be one of the most defining elections in our time in 2024. We need to at least get God involved and we need to say, what do you want to do, Lord? So we organized right out of Nashville the Great American Prayer event, and we got all 50 states involved, and everybody got excited about it. And we started a prayer event the night before the election where we started at 6 o'clock Eastern time, and we created a prayer wave all the way across America by time zones. So for 5 hours, it went all the way out to Hawaii. We had America praying for the election, that, Lord, we're asking you to save America. Help us to make the right decision. You call the shots. You make the decision. And then we'll give you the praise for whatever you decide to do. So we prayed for 5 hours, straight 5 hours across America. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen. We had thousands of people praying. We had millions watching on a live stream. We did live stream. And we live streamed the whole thing, and it was a smashing success. And the next day we saw everybody went to the polls, and the Lord reported out his desire, which was that the Lord saved America from certain catastrophe and gave us now a new lease, an opportunity to try to rebuild America. So once we got through with that, the team came back and says, we've got to do something now to rebuild the walls of our values. We've been given a reprieve from the Lord to have another 4 years. So we need to take advantage of this. So we started praying for what do we do? How do we do this? And the Lord gave us the prayer of this is going to be called the Great American Prayer Revival. We're going to do something that has never been done before, and it is going to be in the spring of 2026, we're going to do the Great American Prayer Revival, where we're calling all 50 states to join in an effort to create and ignite revivals in every state in the Union at the same time. That has never happened before. In 250 years of history of the United States of America, there's never been a national awakening. Never. It's always been a state or a group or, a section, but it's never been the whole nation at once. So we have been out recruiting all this past spring. We've got 45 states committed that they're going to do this with us. It's coming out of Nashville, Great American Prayer Revival, and the idea is March the 1st through the 4th, 2026, is going to be dedicated to doing a special series of meetings in your state in your state, all 50 states, of saying we're going to come together and seek revival. A lot of people don't know what it is, much less how to get it. So the idea is to explain to them what revival is. So you ask that question, what is revival? Revival is when you have, at one time you had an experience with Jesus, but it's kind of died away, and you've kind of put it on the shelf. You've kind of just left it. It's just not been used. It's just like a book on a shelf. You read it one time, you put it down, and it's got dust on it now. Revival means when all of a sudden you got the spark, I want to pick that book up again and read it again. And when you start reading it, you find the original joy that you had when you first read it. And that joy brings you a fresh new life. That's revival. And that's what we're after. When people begin to understand all that we have in Jesus, and they go back to remember what it was like when we first discovered Jesus, and now we go back and we rediscover him, all of a sudden the joy breaks out. People get so excited to remember what Jesus did in my life that they can't quit talking about him, singing about him, clapping their hands about him. It is the most unbelievable, toe-tapping, foot-stomping revival that you can ever experience. So we're calling it the Great American Star-Spangled Revival of 2026. Is coming next March. March 1
It
through the
happens to
4th.
coincide with the 250th anniversary of America being declared a country. Okay, that's the Star-Spangled part. So Elvis Presley's 1973 television special, Aloha from Hawaii via satellite, was a groundbreaking event that reached a record-breaking global audience estimated between actual viewership ranging from 150 to 200 million people. It was the first time a concert by a single artist was broadcast live via satellite to a worldwide audience. Do you think you have a chance to match those numbers?
Yes, we do. I really do. Yeah, I think we do have that ability. We've got a commitment from TBN that they love the idea of what we're going to do. And Matt Crouch told me himself that we're going to commit to doing this. We're going to broadcast it. So not just one night, we're going to do the whole thing. Every night we're going to broadcast it. That was his commitment. And he also added that if it really breaks out and it goes beyond the 4 days that you have, we're going to scrap our programming and we're going to do it even further. We're going to keep going. Because really, if you've never seen a real revival, a lot of people have never really seen the real thing. There's a revival, and then there's the real thing revival. There's a revival where you can call a series of meetings where you have a guest evangelist in, and he preaches, and everybody has a good time, and then they go back to their world. But then there is a real revival like Asbury had at the college, where you go to your chapel and you start praying, and all of a sudden the Spirit of God comes down on the place, and all of a sudden people are so touched they don't want to leave the church. They just stay there. And that's what happens with real revival. When God comes down and you really feel him, you sense him and you feel him, you don't want to leave. You want to stay there. You just want to pray and bask in that glory that is there in that moment. And that's what a real revival does. People get their hearts straightened out with Jesus. They get filled with the Spirit, and all of a sudden there's this joy that breaks out. And when you experience that, you don't want to leave it. You don't want to go home. You want to stay there. And that's what happened at Asbury. And that little town of 5,000 people, when they experienced that on that campus, word got out that there is something great happening on the campus, and 100,000 people drove from everywhere because they wanted to experience it too. That's real revival. And the potential is that the Great American Prayer Revival will kickstart a national great revival, the real thing that has never happened in American history.
Wow. So recent data and trends from sources like Barna Group and the American Bible Society show a significant increase in commitment to Jesus among young people, particularly Gen Z and millennials, especially men. Many young people express a desire to learn more about Jesus, and there is a general openness and curiosity about spiritual matters within this generation, like the Asbury Revival in 2023. Do you see a thirst for Jesus out there we can be hopeful about? Elvis was actually broadcast to 1.5 billion people, but 150 to 200 million, they say, tuned in. Do you think this could be global in billions?
Yes, I think so too, because if TBN gets involved in this, they have translators and satellites all over the world. So there's the potential it's a worldwide event now. When TBN gets into this, then with all of their reach, it's a worldwide event. So the Great American Prayer event, the Great American Prayer Revival, is going to be watched by the entire world. And the intent is to say that as the world watches what's going on in America on the television, they're going to say, well, how come we can't do this in our country?
Right.
And then it will be a reach to all of the 200 countries of the world.
Something like 93% of Asia has never heard the word of Jesus, so that's plenty of opportunity for ears to hear. Hawaii had Elvis.
Yeah.
Billy Graham, you mentioned, had Johnny Cash.
Right.
Who does Gap 26 have?
Oh, that's a good question. We're waiting for that person, the right person, to be that way, to show up and say yes. But we've had so many people just come out of the woodwork saying, I love this idea. Everywhere I've traveled, and I've traveled all over the country telling people about Gap 26, recruiting in all of the states, and it's the same way everywhere. People are saying, we love this idea. This is doable.
Great.
We can do this. And it lights a fire
Who
every time.
are the 4 missing states that we could help if someone's listening to?
We're going to wrap it up too real quick. We got 5 states left, and then it's Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Oregon. Those are the 5. Everybody else is in.
There's an opportunity for Oregon now.
There's an opportunity for Oregon, and that's going to happen. All of the states are going to come on board on this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. And it is so exciting because then they begin to dream of what we could do with this. And it opens so much excitement that it's thrilling to be a part of it.
It is, and you are the founder. What are you most looking forward to in the coming years once that's done?
I want to use every opportunity I have to talk about Jesus. People say, well, you've done television, you've done radio, you've been in politics, and you could, write books and everything like that. My desire is to talk about Jesus everywhere I can, anytime I can, with anybody, because Jesus changed my life. And I know if he can change me, he can change anybody. Right. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people come to the Lord and enjoy life. People are out there wandering around everywhere, and they're begging for somebody to talk to them. Especially young people. And people say, well, how do you know that you ought to talk to them? I'm telling you, listen, when you see a kid out on the college campus, he's got earrings, he's got tattoos, he's got, he looks like a left-wing radical. He is just broadcasting by his appearance that he wants to talk to somebody. He may be argumentative, he may be resistant, he may be hateful at first, but that kid is that way because he's been taught that way. He's been burned so much in his past that he's not going to take it anymore. So he's got this big shell around his heart. I'm not going to get hurt anymore. That's what these young people are showing you by the way they are, the way you see them on TV. You'd think, boy, these kids just need a bath and all that stuff. But if you look at them, they all have a soul. They all have a heart. They just need to have somebody interested in them enough to be able to sit down with them and hear their pain. And then you can tell them about Jesus, and you can see their lives changed. And all of a sudden, they become beautiful people. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. God never intended for you to be miserable. Mm-hmm. But it's very rare when somebody will take the time to sit down with you and say, listen, let's talk. Tell me where your pain is. What's going on in your life? And then talk about the real issues. Is God real? Can he change my life? Can he make me happy? That's what they're yearning for. And a lot of it too is that a lot of them don't have dads. A lot of them don't have granddads. So those are the two people that really can speak life into a young person, a dad and especially a granddad. Matter of fact, a granddad is more powerful than the dad because a granddad can speak from years of experience into the heart of a young person. So when I go around young people, I just say, listen, just consider me granddad. Just consider me your granddad. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just tell you what your granddad would tell you. And I'll talk to them about the Lord. And they appreciate that. They're not going to, they don't, try to run you off. They appreciate the fact that you're looking at me as an individual with potential. And even though they may look like they don't care, they care, and they never forget it.
Yeah, they don't need Johnny Cash or Elvis. They need Jesus.
That's right.
There you go. You got him. Well, Hank, you have become a dear friend and a mentor. I want to thank you for coming on here. We are at the end, so tell everyone where they can find out more about Gap 26, find out about you. I know you don't do social media, but anything that you can direct the audience to get involved.
Oh, you're mighty kind. I appreciate that. Yeah. If they want to know more about the Great American Prayer Revival, just go to gap-event.org. That's our website, and it will tell you all about Gap 26. I wear the cap to let everybody know that something big is coming, and so go to gap-event.org. And I'm on Facebook. You can just write in Hank Erwin in the search, and it'll come up with my page, and you can just follow along. We also have a Facebook post for the Great American Prayer Revival. You can put that in the search, and it will come up, and you can read all of the latest information about what's going on. Tell your friends. Tell your loved ones, tell everybody at church, tell everybody you can see, have you heard about Gap 26? And amazing things will happen. They'll say, yes, I'm all in. And I want you to be all in too. Steve, great job. I'm so proud of you for your podcast. You keep up the good work.
Thank you. And you just told all my friends, so now you go tell all your friends. Everybody, hang on. I'll be right back.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way a good man works until the daylight's gone.
Thanks for coming back. Oh man, I hope you like and share that one. A great man. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That's how we grow and keep this content free. Now the Heartland Journal news. Little more on Minnesota crime for this week following Dr. Jensen's show yesterday. Federal prosecutors announced another criminal case. 49-year-old Jahad Hashi, described as an enforcer, quote unquote, for Ilhan Omar's campaign, admitted in court to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and one count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. These charges stem from the single biggest COVID scam in American history. Governor Tim Walz allowed a group of politically connected Somali criminals, including Ilhan Omar, to embezzle approximately $250 million in public funds. This was the single largest COVID scam-related fraud during the pandemic. A government-funded non-governmental organization, NGO, called Feeding Our Future, based in Minnesota, received $250 million intended to provide meals for children in need. Almost none of the funds were used for food. Where did the money go? Real estate, luxury vehicles and car dealerships, expensive international travel, $160,000 sent to a company in China, $500,000 used to buy an apartment in Kenya. It gets worse. Ilhan Omar received thousands in donations. Donations were made using fake names like Unique Problem and Friday Donations. The Walz administration flagged the suspicious activity and froze the funds. In response, lawsuits were filed accusing Walz of being a racist. Despite concerns, the fraud continued. Another individual indicted for fraud had received the Minnesota Outstanding Refugee Award from Walz himself. That same individual was later accused of attempting to bribe a juror by delivering $120,000 in cash with a note promising more to come if she acquits. Their crimes are absolutely clear: money laundering, bribery, racketeering, conspiracy, robbery, theft, extortion, obstruction of justice, and aiding and abetting. Don't even get me started on California Governor Newsom and his fire fund. Maybe next time. Wonder if you heard this on CNN. Peer-reviewed study finds all vials contained billions to hundreds of billions of DNA fragments, including SV40, spike, and ORI, by Nicholas Holster, MPH. A newly published peer-reviewed study by Dr. David J. Speicher, sorry, Speicher, Dr. Jessica Rose, that's easy, and Kevin McKernan has confirmed that both Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 mRNA injections are contaminated with residual plasmid DNA at levels up to 627 times higher than internationally regulated safety limits. The contamination was not limited to older formulations. The bivalent and XBB.1.5 versions also contain DNA residues, providing the problem has not been corrected. The study analyzed 32 vials representing 16 unique Pfizer and Moderna mRNA injection shots and found that every vial contained billions to hundreds of billions of DNA fragments. It's practically cannibalism. Many encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles that act as delivery vehicles into human cells. In Pfizer's vials, investigators also detected SV40 promoter enhancer sequences, potent genetic elements known for nuclear targeting and tumorigenic potential, causes cancer. Regulators set a hard ceiling of 10 ng of DNA per dose decades ago to prevent risks of insertional mutagenesis, cancer, and other genomic harms. These vaccines blew past those thresholds by orders of magnitude. Extreme DNA contamination, Pfizer doses contain 371 to 1,548 ng of DNA per dose. Moderna doses contained 1,130 to 6,200 ngs of DNA per dose. Remember, 10 is what they said. FDA, WHO limit 10. That's 36 to 153 times over the limit for Pfizer and 112 to 627 times over for Moderna. Together, this growing body of evidence confirms that widespread plasmid DNA contamination is not an isolated occurrence, but a persistent and global problem. These findings demand immediate market withdrawal of the contaminated mRNA injections. Every additional day of additional puts the public at risk of insertional mutagenesis, cancer, and other genetic harms. Nicholas Holster, MPH, epidemiologist and founder, administrator, McCullough Foundation. But we already knew this, huh? Peter McCullough, episode 318. If not, go back and listen to it, please. The library is there for you forever. The world is just now finding out. Last one. A nation plunged into tragedy, a lost political party relishing in death and destruction, and a resolution to transform this immeasurable loss into a new turning point in the history of freedom. Jeff Childers, September 11th, day that will live in infamy. Good morning, CNC family. It's a perfectly dreadful Thursday. Appropriately, it is also September 11th, a day marked by America's grim refusal to let death fully erase its victims. The same way we mark Pearl Harbor Day every year. Today, in honor of a great man taken for far too soon, I am compelled to interpret today's roundup for a short, pointed, hopefully uplifting, but resolute memorial to Charlie Kirk. Mild-mannered mega influencer, married father of 2 young children, and unapologetic Christian, Charlie Kirk, 31, has been assassinated. As the news circulated late yesterday, I, along with many others, experienced a cascade of overwhelming emotion, stun, and shock at the grisly shooting, horror and grief at the news he died, and unrelieved rage accompanied by an unclear, undirected sense of resolution. But resolution to do what exactly? And just like that, the nation enters its next profound crisis. Early rumors the FBI claimed of an arrest were a hot take. Charlie's unidentified killer remains at large, and as I write these words, and as I read these, a massive manhunt is underway. Last night, President Trump signed an executive order titled Honoring the Memory of Charlie Kirk, which calls for U.S. flags to be lowered to half-staff everywhere in the world through the weekend. One can sympathize with the FBI error. There are a lot of potential suspects. Social media is almost completely dominated by the story. The shooter is missing, and based on the aforementioned left-leaning post, it seems clear that a large minority of progressives are dying to aid and shelter whoever it is. All last night, I kept thinking about a great book I read recently, Manhunt, The 12-Day Chase for Lincoln's Killer. The book includes period headlines that sound like historical echoes of Charlie's case, ringing across the decades. In 1965, the nation's euphoria over winning the Civil War turned instantly to ashes in its mouth. After Democrats slew the president and fled toward the now joyful South, the chase became a cat and mouse intrigue between the entire might of the federal government against two fugitives who were housed and supplied by a series of seditious Democrats trying to whisk them out of the Washington area and into the deep South, where they could be safely shipped to Europe. After assassinating Abraham Lincoln on April 14, 1865, both fled and evaded capture for nearly 2 weeks. Union troops finally cornered him on April 26th in a tobacco barn on Richard Garrett's farm in Virginia. Both refused to surrender, so the soldiers set the barn on fire. Sergeant Boston Corbett shot through a gap between the barn's boards and ironically hit Booth in the neck. Booth was dragged out alive, but paralyzed, and died a few hours later on the farmhouse porch. His last words were, "Tell my mother I die for my country." By country, he meant the defeated Confederacy. Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, and the victorious general turned next president, Ulysses S. Grant, somehow navigated the nation away from its righteous fury into reconciliation. But that generous spirit of forgiveness was the byproduct of 4 years of brutal civil war, which had largely drawn the sting and poison out of the original conflict. By the time Lincoln was killed, both sides were exhausted and the fight was largely out of them. I wonder whether we're at a small point now, or whether at a similar point now, or whether the real fight might be just beginning, Childers asks. Charlie prophetically predicted this. It was almost like God had prepared him. In another dark irony, in April, Charlie posted about what he called assassination culture and called the left a ticking time bomb. Charlie, thank you for giving the last full measure of your devotion to the great cause of preserving liberty and freedom for all. I personally pledge to increase my own devotion to that cause and resolve to do whatever I can to ensure your death has meaning, that through it our efforts will produce a great new turning point in the endless battle between the earthbound forces of light and the forces of darkness in the high places. Jeff Childers, September 11, 2025. I concur. On November 19th, 1863, Charlie's fellow assassination victim Abraham Lincoln prophetically said this, which also feels perfectly appropriate this morning. It is for we, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Here's Charlie's tweet. Assassination culture is spreading on the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% said the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. The left is being whipped into a violent frenzy. Any setback, whether losing an election or losing a court case, justifies a maximally violent response. This is the natural outgrowth of left-wing protest culture, tolerating violence and mayhem for years on end. The cowardice of local prosecutors and school officials have turned the left into a ticking time bomb. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Hank Erwin, for giving the world your gift of storytelling multiplied by 2. One, John, is currently working on Amazon's House of David Season 2. And the other, Andy, who has been on this show when his Jesus Revolution was just out. You can see that on my IMDb page, episode 67. Holy smokes, that's 300 plus shows ago. What an amazing goal for Gap 26, aimed at sparking a third great awakening across the United States. Let's all pray for that. See the movie Woodlawn with John Voight as Bear Bryant. It's good and true story. This is what happens when God shows up, is the tagline. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. See you all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely glory to Jesus Christ, God.
it went from verbal exchanges, heated verbal exchanges, to fighting, and then even knives were brought out. And, in Birmingham, there was bombings and stuff going on at the time, too. It was a big deal. There was like a lot of bombings going on during this time. And so Hank Erwin was asked to speak to the athletes on the football team. And that's what he did. So he spoke to the football team, and basically all the Woodland players listened to his message, to his speech. And he said there was one hope, one truth, one way to the spiritual healing that would have to take place in order to bring unity to the school and unity to the football team. And through this, this way, which is Jesus, a revival happened. And it led to everybody's hearts being changed, not only on the team, but in the school and beyond. They say that in the locker room, the players came to Christ that day. Most every one of them came to Christ. And then Hank Erwin says, they knelt together and got up loving each other, quote unquote. And they came together and won a bunch of games. And then there was a championship game, the high school championship game. And it was the Woodlawn Colonels against the Banks Jets. And that was an undefeated high school football team as well around the way. And that game was so big, it brought so many people together. There was over 42,000 fans that showed up at Legion Field in Birmingham. And it was also said that 20,000 people were turned away. So they potentially could have had over 60,000 people attending a high school football game, which in Alabama, the 40,000 was actually a record, a state record that is still the record. But they could have had 60,000 if the stadium could hold that many. They had to turn away 20,000 of them. So again, it's the biggest high school football game attendance in the history of Alabama. So Erwin says there was, in the big football game, there was Bible verses that were, written on signs all over the stands. People were holding all these signs with Bible verses on them. And then on the field, the banners that the teams bust through in order to start the game, there was Bible verses there, and they were basically saying one way, one truth, one life, And so both teams were affected by this. And so they played together. They even had a summer camp training together, and they even gave glory to God together.
Jesus says to love our enemies. We have to love those that oppose us. If you only love those that love you back, what kind of love is that?
There's something special about you. I can see it. You have a gift, and you have to decide what you want to do with it.
I can't. I play for a team that doesn't even want me. Anybody like me?
I'd like to have a meeting with your football team. I've seen things all over the country.
Well, you and I can see them here.
Do something about this.
It's not my fault, Owen. Trying to coach football.
It's bigger than football.
What would you say if I told you it doesn't have to be this way? What would you be prepared to do? I'm asking you right now to stand up and make a decision, to change, to forgive, to be forgiven. That's how much God loves you.
What just happened?
Look at me. I'm proud of you. Win or lose, you're my son. The good book says, without a vision, the people perish. I say, go give it to them.
How many black players you got?
Not nearly enough.
Why you see that changing?
Because it's time. You know the difference between you and these people? They're cowards. And you ain't. Nobody out there knows what's happened with this team.
But when you win on this day, they will!
They call him Touchdown Tony Nathan. He's homegrown, right in Birmingham.
This is your moment. This is your time. So you go and take it. You go and take it.
This is what happens when God shows up.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of the wild, wild plains, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com. where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.